Hey, Husker fans, welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. I'm Chris Peterson, and joining me, as always, was my co-host for this podcast, Danny Gillette. And we're back for another episode with a lot to cover. It seems like there's things happening every day, every hour with Nebraska
Yeah.
football, with the transfer portal, coaching hires. So a lot has happened since Monday. We have 3 new coaching hires announced by Nebraska. A lot of guys leaving in the transfer portal, some other guys visiting. So we're going to cover all that. Plus, the 2025 schedule is out, looking pretty favorable for the Huskers. So before we get into it, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, get into the comment section. That helps all of us out. And Danny, just man, it's been a whirlwind these past few days. How you doing?
I'm a little dizzy. My head's been spinning over these past couple of days, but I'm doing good. And quite honestly, and this is probably not the best thing to say, but I love this time of year more than the actual football season because I think hope springs eternal, as they say, and we haven't suffered heartbreak and anything related to the 2025 season yet. So I think that's why I like this time so much. But boy, I mean, we could do a show every hour about the latest Nebraska news because there's a ton of it.
Yeah, it's been coming out very frequently, guys entering the portal. And I guess we should start by one man that didn't enter the transfer portal, which is Dylan Raiola. There was,
Yeah.
a bit of a rumors. Chris Hummer of 24/7 Sports kind of reported that,
Yeah.
some teams were sniffing around, which I'm not surprised. And as Matt Rule kind of indicated, that's going to happen with good players. They're going to get
Yep.
contacted. Raiola's one of the better players in the country. But as I wrote in my article when I posted it, there has been zero indication that he, was reciprocal to that or showed any interest in leaving. So I didn't expect him to leave. It was good that he did the post, but kind of sad that he had to do that. Vincent
Yeah.
Shavers also did one like that. So it's just kind of a sign of the times, I guess.
Yeah, people were mad at Chris Hummer and say, "Oh, why are you reporting this, Chris? Dylan would never leave and blah blah blah. You're a joke." But I talked to some of my Miami friends, and they indicated that Miami was sniffing around a little bit. So I don't think Chris Hummer was completely off base, to be completely honest with you. But it is kind of sad where he has to do a post where he's like, "Oh, I'm coming back. I'm not leaving," and I wasn't worried about his loyalties to Nebraska, but I mean, shit, if somebody gave me $4 million to come to Miami, as a college kid, I would consider it.
Yeah, you have to consider it. I mean, that's the way it works. These kids are going to get offers. I mean, in Raiola's not the only one. Other
Yeah,
Nebraska players have been poached too. And the thing is Nebraska's doing the same thing. So
yeah,
you can't cry about it because it happens both ways. And Chris Hummer reported something that happened. So I mean, I don't
yeah,
know why he didn't say that they were leaving or that Raiola was going to leave. He literally said that other programs had talked to him, and Nebraska was slightly worried because you have to worry about
yeah,
every player on your
yeah,
roster now. Because anybody, it's like, yeah, I'm not worried about. I'm sure they felt confident in Dylan Raiola staying, but what if like Miami's like, well, we'll just throw out one of those like a Bryce Underwood offer and is like going to pay him 10 million?
yeah,
Then
yeah.
you just never know. I think it's the unknown that worries coaches. And so anyway, getting back to some of the news that happened yesterday of guys who have entered the transfer portal. One big one was Kiana Davis, who ended up returning
Mm-hmm.
after the Huskers, hired John Butler. They hired Braden from is that how you pronounce the name? Terry Braden or Terry
Yep, I believe
Braden.
so. Yep.
Anyways, from the Kansas City Chiefs has been the assistant D-line coach. Phil Snow is going to come on as associate head coach. So kind of the same time that those happened, Kiana Davis came back, which I think is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, it
This
is.
is a guy who can start potentially next year and is a freshman. So that to me was almost as big as Emmett Johnson coming back.
Yeah, Keanu Davis coming back brings some familiarity to what is going to be an ever-changing defensive line. I think this year or 2025, you're going to see a lot of changes on the line, a lot of new faces, and so to have somebody kind of familiar with John Butler, more importantly, is going to be important. And I think Davis coming back is a great sign, and I'm curious to see who else they can add on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's been, I mean, so far Nebraska hasn't added anybody, but there hasn't been many teams doing that yet. We're still in the first couple of days getting visits set up. They have hosted, a number of visits so far. Before we touch on the visitors, though, there was, I would say, a surprise transfer departure on Wednesday. Nate Borkacher, the tight end, who was going to be a senior this year, started 6
Mm,
games, played in all 12. That one did catch me off guard a little bit. What do you think about
yeah.
Borkacher hitting the portal?
Caught me off guard a little bit too because when you looked at how he performed under Dana Holgerson, they utilized him more, I thought, and he's a really good athlete, really good runner. I thought honestly he's the best tight end on the roster. So that kind of surprised me a little bit, but it also to me means that maybe Carter Nelson will have a bigger role. I think Thomas Fedoni is still going to be on the team. I'm not certain. Was he only a junior this year?
Yeah, he's got one more year of eligibility, and so
we
I
have
think a lot
that.
of I think some people kind of thought that maybe he was going to enter the portal after the Wisconsin game, but he responded really well in the
He
Iowa
did.
game, so maybe he's sticking around, and maybe that meant something for Borkature. But seemed like to me there's definitely enough snaps for both guys if they wanted to return, because Borkature definitely I think the best run blocking tight end on this roster, so they're going to miss him. And whether Fedoni leaves, then they're definitely going to need to get a veteran. But even without Borkature, I'd like to see them go get another blocking tight end that they can kind of add some depth to the room there. But we'll see. I mean, they have a lot of other needs too.
And to me, this also means that they think that Carter Nelson can have a bigger role next year. So I'll be interested to see how that part of things plays out too. And I would love to see Nelson take on a bigger role.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Nelson, plays receiver or tight end next year. I think he could do either. And I'm also, not to get too much into it, but one guy I really like in the transfer portal is Deuce Robinson, the 6'6", wide receiver from USC. And he's a guy that came out of high school, was a tight end, and kind of viewed as a tight end, and has played receiver for USC. So maybe Carter Nelson could follow along that same kind of development path. But I know that Robinson and Raiola almost played together in high school, and it just seems like there's maybe a connection there. I don't know. Nebraska could use a big time receiver like that, just a big guy who can go make plays, and he's a freak athlete. He probably is good enough to get drafted by a Major League Baseball team. Maybe already has. I haven't followed it, really since he was a recruit, but he definitely is in the top tier of guys that I would like to see added to this team.
Just for the namesake, I would love to see Nitro Tuggle added to the roster. Former teammate of, not teammate, but acquaintance of Dylan Raiola. Nitro Tuggle, I would love. Give me Nitro Tuggle all day. I don't care if he sits on the bench and has 0 catches. I just want a guy with a name Nitro Tuggle.
I really like. Honestly, I've said that I think they need to bring in a couple of receivers, and maybe that's probably even more true now that Davon Hall and Isaiah McMorris have hit the portal, and it is kind of crazy. I remember when Danny Kalen and McMorris and Hall all committed, and we were all so excited, and none of them have actually played a meaningful down for Nebraska. So I mean that's disappointing, but I can't blame them if they want to have a chance to play somewhere else. But the guy I would love to see in this receiving room is Jonte Cook. I know that's going to be tough because Oregon and Texas A&M are all over him, but he is visiting Nebraska according to reports, and man, that guy, he's lightning in a bottle. And if you put him on the field with Cortez Mills and Ja'Cory Barney, and then a Carter Nelson and Quinn Clark, and maybe if you add somebody else to that room, a Dane Key, you would be very, very difficult to stop, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that you just mentioned, just an absolute stud wide receiver room right there. And I think that's ultimately why Hall and McMorris transferred, because now you're at a different level of recruiting. I think you're able to get to that different level because you showed promise, because you have, one of the best young quarterbacks in the country, and quite frankly, because you had a winning season. I mean, you're able to add wide receiver talent, and one of the guys that, I really want to see is Eric Rivers. I mean, Rivers is such a good playmaker. He's actually coming to visit Nebraska on December 15th through the 16th, and he's also taking a visit to Miami before that on December 13th and 14th, and then Penn State and Colorado will finish up his visits. But, if I had to throw the bag at anybody for a wide receiver, I would definitely choose Eric Rivers to kind of throw the money at. But the names you mentioned as well, I wouldn't be mad at all.
Yeah, and that's it should be, mentioned, I guess, in terms of these visits, Nebraska's already had some other ones this week. Dominic Giudice, he played for Michigan. I'm not sure how he pronounces his name still, but he visited earlier this week. I think that was actually yesterday. And then Central Michigan defensive lineman Jonah Pace, also he's like an edge defensive line type. He visited. Kevin Gallick, a long snapper. Please. Kevin Gallick's on my list of priority targets. Please, Kevin Gallick, long snapper from New Hampshire. Yep. I just would FCS All-American according to Phil Snow, but he's got a bunch of teams have offered him. If you go to his Twitter account, like TCU, a bunch of other ones, because teams need long snappers, but that would be nice. I would give him some money today. Like, just lock it down. And because I mean, I can't remember, was the missed kick against Illinois, was that a bad snap? The game.
Yes.
So I mean,
No, I think it
well,
was a bad hold.
I think it was a bad hold, but I think the snap wasn't great. I think that's maybe part of the reason why the hold wasn't great. I can't remember, but I know the snap wasn't good against Iowa. So I mean, maybe if we have a better snapper, we win those 2 games. I don't know. I just would be nice to see them lock up a long snapper, and then you can tell that they're definitely putting a focus on edge, on pass rush, because they lost some guys. Cameron Olds from Kent State, 6 sacks last season, 6'4", 245, is going to be visiting this weekend.
Mhm.
And then Williams, no idea how to pronounce the last name. I'm going to say Nwaneri, but I have no idea if that's right. But the kid from Missouri, 6'6", 255, that Eli Drinkowitz did the crazy celebration for. Only 1 sack last season, but Jamar Mosey was his head coach, and Isaiah Mosey was his teammate. He visited Nebraska before, and even the LSU reporter for On3, Shea Dixon, he was talking about in one of his reports, like, that basically LSU, I mean, is interested in this kid, but that there's already like kind of signs that Nebraska is the early favorite. So that's not just a pipe dream, them landing Williams Nwaneri. And I probably butchered that name, sorry, but anyway, he would be a huge piece on the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about the need for edge guys. We definitely need some, and then you have Philip Simpson kind of manning the outside linebackers and the edge guys. A very solid coach. I think that could be a good connection, like you said. Nwaneri came over last year and visited a couple times. I believe he was part of that March 26th visit weekend, if you remember. And so I would love to see him circle back to Nebraska. We need edge guys. We need, playmakers. And, I think if we could at least get Nwaneri, Rivers, and I'm trying to think, maybe, one or 2 more corners, then I would be happy. That's not all we need, but that's just kind of like my wish list.
Yeah, it's interesting because they haven't, I put together my wish list at HuskerBigRed.com. I got 6 guys on there. I already mentioned a couple of them. Another one is Jamal Jarrett from Georgia, 6'5", 350 pounds, played 11 games this year. I want a nose tackle on this team. I know people we're talking about, like, man, this D-line, if they get the kid from Missouri, Nwaneri, Riley Van Poppel and Keanu Davis, like, what a defensive line that would be. And that would be a nice defensive line, but who's going to play nose? Riley Van Poppel, like, at 290, he's 290 right now. And if you think back, in my opinion, because Nash, and this maybe hasn't just been talked about enough, but like, Nash was listed this year at 310, and in 2023 he played at 330 because he had to drop 45 pounds to wrestle, and he was not the same player in 2024 that he was in 2023, in my opinion. I don't think he was
a
as
lot
dominant
better last year.
Yeah, and he was 330 pounds because it's hard to play nose at 310. And like, I think that Riley Van Poppel can play the Ty Robinson, that 3 technique role, but to be a true nose, you need to be like the Vince Wilfolk, like, you need that 330, like a Mozzie Smith, who are some of those, like one of those just big dudes. And this guy doesn't have to play a ton.
You remember
he
Ted Washington from back in the day, played with the Raiders, Patriots at the end of his career? Yeah.
That's what I want. Just a massive body that cannot be moved, like can barely even get out to the field, but just cannot move, like whatever you will do. Like, so I don't know if that's Jamal Jarrett. I like the SEC guys, but I think that's the one thing they're missing. It is interesting though. I haven't seen them offer any corners. I know that they were going to have Devin Neal, I think the safety from Louisville, visit, but they haven't shown much interest in cornerbacks yet. At least I haven't seen it, and that doesn't mean
I haven't seen it
happened.
either, but I think they were kind of waiting to see who the defensive coordinator was going to be.
That's true. Yeah.
And people are okay. So sorry, I'm going to go off on a tangent, but it's football related and whatever. People are saying that John Butler didn't do a good job with the corners last year, and to that I argue. Tommy Hill was injured. Bly Hill, who they initially thought was going to be a factor at the beginning of the season, was not in the picture. Sayer Wright played well, and that's because, he was able to come in and make an impact immediately, and I thought Butler did a decent job with him. And there was no size once those injuries happened at the corner position. So I feel like to pin bad cornerback play on John Butler is a little bit unfair because there's no way in a John Butler world, a guy who's coached for the Houston Texans and Buffalo Bills and coached all-pro corners, that he's putting 5'8" Malcolm Hartzog out of corner and feeling comfortable with it.
Yeah, I think it's a little unfair to put that all on because, I mean, for one, their best corner was never right. I mean, after that Colorado game, Tommy Hill he just wasn't right. You could tell he could barely play. And then, Blyhill got hurt and, he did come back at the end, but, he wasn't there for almost the entire season. And then, Jeremiah Charles, I'm pretty sure, battled injuries too. So almost everybody in the secondary that had any sort of experience got hurt. And then Sayre Wright came in here and had the best season of his career. It looked like a top 100 recruit for the first time. I mean, he, like I said on our last podcast, like he literally was sitting in June or July, like nobody wanted this guy. Literally nobody wanted him. And Nebraska got him.
Mind, now I think about
it.
Yeah.
And Nebraska got him because they saw the talent and, and John Butler, you have to give him credit for that. And Sayre Wright played really well. Hopefully he's coming back this year. I mean, that's the thing with a lot of these guys is it's like, he could go to the draft, they could go to the portal, they could, it feels like every offseason's a decision. And the one good thing is there's no spring portal. And I think some have been confused about that. There is not a second portal. This is it. So whatever the roster is from December 28th, that's what it is. You got some news, Danny? Or
transfer portal season is in full effect, folks. On 3, Steve Wiltfong and Pete Nakos, who's a very good reporter if you don't know him. Just speaking to the audience here, I know a lot of you know Steve Wiltfong, have logged predictions for Nebraska to land Missouri transfer edge Williams Nwaneri.
Nwaneri. Or however you say it. I have no idea if we're pronouncing it right. But
we're gonna learn how to say it soon, hopefully. Cross our fingers.
Well, come on, Missouri. Like Missouri, Nebraska at least has the pronunciation thing there. I went to Missouri's page to try to get, the pronunciation, and instead of the pronunciation, you just get a link to like his page where you can do like the, oh my god, like the videos and stuff for you, like your happy birthday stuff. It's like, come on, Missouri. Maybe I guess in that state, maybe they know how to say his name because he was a big deal there, but. That would be huge. That would be huge.
Wiltfong and Nakos. I mean, Pete Nakos has been a great reporter. I'm sure you followed him for all of the transfer news and stuff. He's been really solid.
He's been really good.
So, So if they log, predictions, I feel comfortable saying that Nebraska will land him. Quite honestly, I'm not going to say they're guaranteed to, but I feel comfortable in saying that they will, and that would be huge.
And the thing about too with the transfer predictions is like you don't see those like flipping as much. Like these guys are on a condensed timeline. Like they're going to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. So I feel like most of the time with the transfer portal things, like when they put in that prediction, like it's pretty much a done deal. Like, something could happen. Maybe like the NIL deal falls apart or somebody else comes in with a great, like things like that can happen. But I would say at least in the past few years, like 98% it feels like of these transfer portal predictions end up being true. So I would feel very confident that this is going to happen.
I know we don't need him, but we talked about wish lists. I would love to see AJ Allen back in Nebraska.
Yeah, he would be. Yeah, he's on my wish list too. Like, he didn't crack my wish list for Husker Big Red because I only included 6. But I mean, he definitely is on my wish list because he is an impact player, and I know
Miami's
I like our running back
room was like really like that was one of the best running back rooms in the country. So I felt like he got underutilized there, but I would love to see him back. I was so sad when he left, and so I guess you can add him to my wish list too.
And I feel like he is a good receiver. And we're losing Ramir Johnson, and somebody's going to have to step into that role. And it could definitely be somebody on the roster, but if they could get AJ Allen, I think that would be a positive thing. But it's this kid from Missouri is going to take a big chunk of probably the NIL budget, and so we'll see what else they can get done. But I am excited about it.
What budget is?
I don't know because I saw that thing where it had Nebraska. Like it's $7 million. So there's a post going around of different NIL budgets for teams, so people know what the hell I'm talking about. And Nebraska was like at 7.9, and Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon were like in the 20s. But I'm just not sure how accurate that is. It doesn't really say where they got it probably does. I just didn't look closely enough. But it's not like I just feel like it's going to be different with the 1890 going forward.
I would say Nebraska at this point probably higher than 7.9. I'd say probably
they
like 11, 12.
I would think they'd have to be.
Dylan Raiola is 1.5 million right there. So
yes. And I think what thing was interesting is Matt Rule said last year, like Ohio State spent $20 million on their roster. We don't have a $20 million roster, so I think they're trying to get there, and adding guys like Nwaneri would really help. And I talked a couple of weeks ago about how Nebraska hasn't had a guy like that since like Randy Gregory, and they haven't. And he only had 1 sack last year, but who cares? Like he's a big time player, and I feel like Nebraska can get the most out of him. And that's one thing we can get to these coaching moves, but I really like the Terry Braden hire from the Chiefs, because if you've watched the Chiefs, during this incredible run that they've had, they've had incredible quarterback play from Patrick Mahomes, but probably number 2 most consistent thing they've had is great defensive line play. And I mean, like they draft guys, like they drafted Mike. Yeah, and they drafted my guy Mike Dana from Michigan, was like a 7th round pick, and this dude's coming in making sacks right away. So the development there has been really impressive, and I feel like, I have no idea how much Braden's responsible for it, but I feel like he's definitely had a role in it, and bringing him here, I think that's going to be really a really good hire, because kids like playing for guys who've been to the NFL, who kind of know what it takes to get there. So I like this hire, and let's get into it, I guess, a little bit with these coaching hires. You kind of touched on it. I know a lot of people are freaking out about John Butler and that he's not the best hire or whatever, but here's the thing. And because Michigan just hired an offensive coordinator, and they kind of did the same thing. But like I remember when Mike McDonald, and I'm sorry for the Michigan references, but this is what I have to reference. When Mike McDonald was hired in 2021, he was like John Harbaugh's linebackers assistant, and everybody was like, oh my God. All the Michigan fans were like, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. He's never coordinated a defense. 3 years later, he's a head coach in the NFL. Jesse Minter, the next year after that, was the defensive coordinator at Vanderbilt, and they're like, he coordinated the 120th ranked defense, and he's no good. And it's like, well, he was at Vanderbilt, and now he's going to be a head coach. So just because the guy isn't a big name right now doesn't mean he's not going to be a big name in a couple years. And winning the press conference, like how many times have we won the press conference and then fallen flat on our face? So I don't care about the press conference. I care about results. And John Butler's he's proven results in the NFL year after year.
And not only that, but people are like, oh, he was at Penn State for 1 year. He did this, and then he left. Okay, first, the 1 year he was at Penn State, they were under sanctions for the Sandusky, incident. So that limited the amount of scholarships and the amount of talent. Secondly, the reason why he was at Penn State for 1 year was because Bill O'Brien got the job to go to Houston, and he went with O'Brien to the Texans, and that started his NFL pipeline. So for people who are dogging on him about his Penn State, time and say, oh, the defense wasn't that good, the limitations were extremely severe.
And you got to look at, there's so many, it's so hard to judge coordinators and things like that. I mean, based on, there's so many different X factors that go into it. But what I look at, he was with the Bills for the last 6 years, and they had a top 5 pass defense 5 times. And he was the defensive pass a game coordinator, I think, 3 of those last 3 years, and they had a top 5 pass defense twice. I mean, like Micah Hyde has been an exceptional player there, a bunch of guys, and you have to give him, you have to give him credit for that. There's been other ones too.
Tre'Davious White,
yeah. I mean, like they have a great defense, and he wanted to be a coordinator, so it seems like to me this always made a lot of sense. And yeah, maybe Matt Rule wanted to try to get the guy from like SMU or the Broncos. I really don't know. But at the end of the day, he did say that he likes the defense that they've been running. And I think Butler, he's going to have his own twist on it. They're not going to run the Tony White scheme, but, I think for the most part, they're going to run a similar type of system, and it's multiple anyway. So I have no problem with it.
Because quite honestly, there were a lot of cracks in the Tony White scheme last year. The year before, full credit, they were amazing. Last year, they really, really struggled against pass-friendly teams. And when you look at how the Big Ten landscape changed with Oregon, UCLA, who absolutely torched us, and then Eric Bieniemy was just fired a couple of weeks ago, and even USC with Jade Maivea. I mean, those pass-friendly teams figured out the 3-3-5 really, really quickly. So I think people looking at this as a downgrade. I'm not sure Tony White, and that defense, let's just forget that, he and Matt Rule didn't see eye necessarily. I just don't think the scheme maybe would have held up next year.
And when I look at schemes, and I want NFL caliber coordinators, because when you play those better teams, the Ohio States and the USCs and the Oregons, you're playing NFL quarterbacks. So you need an NFL defensive coordinator. Like you have to be able to mix and match coverages, disguise coverages. Like if you want to look at what Michigan did to Will Howard against Ohio State, they confused the crap out of them. Like because basically they only had to rush 4 guys and play 4 guys, 4 or 5 in the box because their D line was so good, and they just confused him, and he had no idea what he was seeing. So when people are talking about like why Ohio State didn't throw, it's because the secondary was mixing things up so much they didn't trust their quarterback to throw, and that's what a good. That's what
Kelly's piece of work, but that's
but
the thing. Yeah, I get what you're saying though.
But that's what good defensive coordinators do. They confuse. Like there's 2 ways to beat a good quarterback. You can beat him with your defensive line, and you can beat him by confusing him. And it's easier to do in college. And I think that those guys that are able to do that, and they're like elite in the secondary and elite in the defensive line, I think those make strong defensive coordinators. So I really like that John Butler's been a defensive pass game coordinator and worked with the secondary. And if they can get that defensive line, still cranked up, I think that's going to be a good thing. And you know what? I like the hire of Phil Snow. I think that's a smart move. And because look, Butler's a first-time defensive coordinator and he can help out there. But I think it's more just, offering a helping hand to somebody that can just be, he's been a defensive coordinator coach for like 30 freaking years. So when Matt Rule or somebody's like doing something kind of dumb, maybe you can be like, hey, Matt, maybe let's not take a time out here. Maybe let's not waste a challenge here. Simple things like that. But seriously.
No, I'm just thinking about all the times where Phil Snow could have been of use over the last couple of years.
But Matt Rule didn't have an associate head coach, and I think it's smart to have somebody like that that's not in charge of your offense, not in charge of the defense per se. And Phil Snow can help, like he was a defensive coordinator, so he can absolutely help like Dana Holgorsen be like, hey man, this is a look that you might get against that. You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's a really smart hire, and I think he's going to help this team on game days. I really do. So I don't understand why people are against it.
Because they like to complain about everything. You know what I mean?
I know.
But
I get it if he was the defensive coordinator, but even then you could do a lot worse.
I'm not against it, but I am kind of a little bit worried about the age thing. But I was watching a couple interviews yesterday, and his stance on NIL and that part of it was very refreshing. So that kind of eased me a little bit because I was wondering if he was going to be like more old school, don't pay players type of thing, and that. But he seemed very open to the idea of recruiting in NIL, and he seemed like a very energetic, person and very lively. So I think he'll be a good addition on the staff. I wasn't too sure about the move initially, but I'm feeling a lot better about it based on what I've seen and kind of read a little bit.
And then the thing I like about Matt Rule too, and we talked about this a little bit Monday, but he understands the importance of recruiting, right? And so, they lose a dynamic recruiter in Garrett McGuire. They go out and get one in Phil Simpson, and we've talked about it, but they're kind of shifting, I think, that focus maybe from Texas to Florida a little bit. I mean, you're seeing them focus more in the Midwest, but I think they're really getting a foothold in Florida. The new D-line coach is from Florida. So I like that, and I think Phil
Mosey has connections to Florida.
Yep, and so
Braden does. So
so I love Simpson there, and I think these were good moves. I don't know that they're you keep getting hints from like the Husker Online guys that they might not be done with coaching moves. So I'm not sure exactly what that means, but maybe Satterfield leaves.
You can have 30,000 analysts now.
Yeah, maybe more. Maybe more analysts, or I'm assuming they're going to need a secondary coach because I don't think John Butler is going to coach because Tony White was just a DC. So I'm assuming
they don't have a secondary coach yet, but I think it might be coming soon. So
go get another guy from the NFL, man. Like I like the NFL guys. They really because you need to have diverse schemes, I think, is the most important thing. You need to be able to line up in a 3-5, a 3-3-5, a 2-4-5, a 4-4. You almost need to be able to do it all anymore because, I mean, one week you could see a 5-out, 4-out spread offense, and the next week you see Iowa. I mean, things are so multidimensional in college football, and I feel like getting more of those NFL guys are a helpful thing on the defensive side of the ball.
And this might be a very controversial take, but I see a lot of people saying like, oh, kids are going to go to college and, these players, they need to learn commitment and they need to learn life lessons. That's what they're there for. Not today's college football players. I mean, some of them sure are, you know what I mean? But for a lot of them, it's about the money and can I get to the NFL and how can I maximize, my playing time and my potential. And getting an NFL staff, a proven NFL staff, with Braden and Butler and Phil Snow and Matt Rule and guys that know what it takes to get to the NFL, that's going to be an attractive recruiting tool. And I give Matt Rule credit for remaking his staff with a bunch of NFL guys, kind of shifting philosophies away a little bit. And, saying, okay, we're going to hire NFL guys because we want to run an NFL type program. And, at the very least, kind of stepping away from, that sort of coaching philosophy of hiring up and coming guys a la Garrett McGuire and Tony White, for example.
Yeah. It's interesting. They definitely made some different moves, and we'll see what other moves they'll make on the coaching staff. But we'll wrap it up here looking at the 2025 schedule. So it got released yesterday. We knew who the opponents were going to be. We just didn't quite know when they were going to play. So here's the schedule. First game against Cincinnati on August 30th, and I think that's going to be at Arrowhead.
I think so too.
100% sure, but and then Akron at home, Houston Christian at home, Michigan at home, then a bye week, Michigan State at home, then at Maryland, at Minnesota, home against Northwestern, home against USC, at UCLA, another bye week, and then home against Iowa. So on the Black Friday game. And my first thoughts are that's a pretty favorable schedule. What were your reactions?
Better than last year, yeah. I think the back half of the schedule is going to be a little bit easier, but there's no reason why this team can't get at least 8 wins. At least, I thought they could have gotten 8 wins this year, but I don't want to dwell too much. But there's no reason why this team can't have a winning season and not only get to a bowl game, but get to a good bowl game that's not in New York. So,
yeah,
I think this is a very crucial year for this coaching staff, and this is a very crucial year for Matt Rule. And this schedule lines up pretty well with what the ramifications of this season are. I think Minnesota is going to be tough because they're always tough, and Michigan's probably not going to be a walk in the park. But I think this team is ready, and we're talking about all these moves and stuff, and there's still a ton of offseason left to be had, of course. So, we'll see what this roster looks like by the time spring ball happens. I'm kind of excited to see, how the influences of all these different coaches, Braden, Butler, Philip Simpson recruiting well in Florida, how that kind of helps shape this roster, because I think it's going to be an entirely different roster than what we saw last season.
And it'll be interesting to see with some of these teams playing too. Like, will Penn State have Drew Aller? What will these?
I hope so. I hope they have Drew Aller, please.
I don't. I think he's pretty good. I mean, at least in college, I'd way rather
be pretty good. And then I get what you're saying though, but I don't.
I'm just saying I would rather play somebody that's like inexperienced than a senior Drew Aller, because the other thing that he does that's really annoying is he just runs really well too. And so like he's never met his potential, but I don't know. I feel like he would give us trouble.
He kills me in NCAA all the time. So
yeah, I kill it with them. Because I play a bunch of different teams. I beat Ohio State with them thanks to him. I just run it though. Like I said, I just run. I just take it down and run. I run a lot of verticals, and then if they ain't open, I just take off. So anyway,
I play an ultimate team right now. I have Shadur as my quarterback, and then a bunch of fast wide receivers, and it's pretty fun. But do you know the matchup I'm looking forward to most next season? Scott Frost against Bill Belichick.
Are they playing next year? Are they playing?
That's going to be must-see TV.
That will be interesting. And so Scott Frost actually, if he didn't take the UCF job, Michigan was trying to get him to be their offensive coordinator. So
that would be great for Michigan, because look, people can laugh and say whatever they want about Scott Frost. In my opinion, is Scott Frost, but he was a pretty good offensive coordinator. So that would have been great for Michigan, but I can't fault them for going back to UCF and kind of.
But here's the funny. Not only that, but you got Rich Rod going back to West Virginia. Like bunch of crazy stuff happening this week. So maybe I like that like. West Virginia was like, wait a minute. They're like, UCF got Scott Frost. They're like, hold on a sec. Maybe we could go back and get Rich Rodriguez too. And then they go, I think those are both better hires than Bill Belichick. I'm not a big fan of that one, but
I don't think so either. Well, I think he can recruit really well, because who the hell is going to say no to Bill Belichick? But I don't know about the NIL stuff. I really don't
Yeah.
know because he notoriously didn't spend his money in the right place as well with the Patriots. So I could see some guy walking because he gave him like a $10 NIL deal as opposed to something else in an effort to save money for the university.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it works out. I saw it was one of the best memes I've ever seen though. I laughed so hard. It was like a guy sneaking out of an older guy sneaking out of like a apartment or something, and
Yeah.
it was all Bill Belichick of the dorms at North Carolina.
He's got to pay for his girlfriend's tuition somehow. She's gonna get a bag if they end up lasting, and so
That-
good
that's
for
what
her
I
too.
that's what I think. He's like, you know what? If I can get a 24-year-old girlfriend, I can recruit 18-year-olds. I can
Yeah,
connect with
yeah.
these young people. So we'll see it. We'll see how it works out. I don't know. It's interesting though, but yeah, in terms of the 2025 schedule, I agree. I think it's a schedule that Nebraska could contend for the playoff. They've got two back-to-backs. What I don't like about it, or what worry me, you play Minnesota and Maryland back-to-back weeks on the road, and then
Those are tough. Yeah,
and the trip to UCLA. At least you don't have to play Penn State the next week, but winning at UCLA is going to be tough, and then winning at Penn State. So all four of those road games, just based on the fact that they have to play them when they do, are going to be difficult to win. So
I honestly don't think Eric Bieniemy was a terrible offensive coordinator for UCLA, which is why I'm wondering why he was fired because he torched us. So I'm wondering how that UCLA game is going to play out. I don't know if they're going to be as good as last year, but they certainly gave us a challenge, that's for sure. We also just sucked. So I don't know. Like that game was terrible. We didn't do well on defense at all. So it's going to be interesting to see. But I am kind of curious about like what this UCLA team is going to look like.
yeah, and really, if you think about it, this year Nebraska easily could have won 9 games because they should have easily beaten Iowa. They should have probably just beaten UCLA if they would have shown up, and they should have beaten Illinois. And if that happens, we're
Yeah.
playing in the Citrus Bowl, and Nebraska's ranked like 22nd or whatever Illinois is ranked right now. That easily, the season that Illinois had easily could have been Nebraska's season.
Should have been
So,
Ohio State too, honestly.
yeah, should have beaten Ohio State, and probably if you do that and win those other games, if you're 10-2 with a win at Ohio State, this team's in the playoff. Like, that's just the truth of it. So it really, like, it's not crazy to be like, oh, this team could contend for the playoff next year, because if they literally wouldn't have pooped themselves this year when it mattered, they would have been there this year. And I'm saying that because I don't want to get, I don't want to say like more swear words, but against Illinois, they lost that game. I don't care what anybody says. Nebraska lost that game. They lost the Iowa game. They literally gave the ball to Iowa in field goal range, missed a field goal. They lost it. They lost the Ohio State game because they couldn't score from the 1-yard line. And the UCLA game, they just didn't show up. So, like, it would have not been that hard for this. Like, this team could have gone 10-2. Like,
UCLA game was so weird. They just didn't wake up. UCLA was ready to go, but we weren't. I don't know why. That was just so weird.
That was I think that was the bowl pressure. Everybody made that out like this is such a huge game, and like it is, and every game is important at a place like Nebraska. But so, anyways, it was good to see
I think
finally
the bowl
break
pressure
through.
will be lifted this year or next year, but I think if Matt Rule doesn't at least get 8 wins next year, he's on the hot seat.
Probably. I agree. Definitely. If he doesn't make a bowl game, he's going to be on the hot seat. So, but yeah, I agree with you. Some people are still trying to have him on the hot seat right now, which is not me. I think he's fine. But
yeah, no, I'm not saying you're stupid, by the way. I'm just saying in general, it's stupid. We'll just recycle coaches again, go through the same thing, and then want to fire him after 2 years.
Yes, that's what happens when you start losing. You start doing things that losers do. It's just you start acting like the Chicago Bears.
There's also a ceiling, I think, at Nebraska, but I'm not sure what that ceiling is yet. I think this year will give us a good indication of what the current ceiling for this program will be.
And also in that same mind, though, like the 12-team era and this transfer portal era is totally new. And so, like, college football in 5 years could be totally different. So in some ways, like, I don't think we know what the ceiling is for this program or for a lot of teams anymore, because I think we're going into an era of parity that we've literally never seen before in college football.
We're going to start to see 4 to 5 year contracts with an opt-out maybe after 3.
Yeah,
that's what needs to happen, I think, because it's time to stop pretending like this is about academics and like college and learning and blah, blah, blah. This is a business where players want to play, they want to get paid, and they want to win championships. And to pretend it has anything to do with academia is just a joke at this point.
Yeah. I agree. And at that point, I got to get on the road, you guys. So we'll wrap it up there. So again, hit the like button if you haven't already. Hit the subscribe button. Get into the comment section. Let us know what your wish list is for Nebraska football in the transfer portal, or some of your thoughts on these departures, coaching hires, or even your win-loss prediction for 2025. It's never too early. So at any rate, we always appreciate the comments. And as always, guys, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.